in May, I finally graduated from university. My school is in a very safe, very upper-middle-class community. Most instances of crime were committed by students and were typical of most college campuses: sexual assault and burglary. Reported incidences of crime were typically on campus or in the downtown area and frat row. My school also has a few highly publicized sexual assault scandals, so I was always wary of dangerous situations and avoided being most places alone at night. I lived off campus in the area that backed up to a part of town that was mostly families and the elderly. I never really felt unsafe until my senior year, when I had 2 run-ins with peeping Toms. The first incident happened at the beginning of my final spring semester. I was often at my friend's apartment on the opposite end of town, usually just to hang out and do some homework. Their apartment was a part of a complex that was solely for students and more or less run by the university. 4 of my friends lived in this suite-style apartment on the ground floor. But on this night, which was a Sunday, only 2 of them were home, and another was driving back to the area that night from her parents' house. All of us actually come from the same geographic area, and since graduation, we all still live near each other, which is great. I was hanging out with my one friend who lived in the apartment. We'll call her Pat, and another friend that lived in the same building. We were waiting on our other friend, Brianna, who was driving back that night. I really wanted to wait for Brianna, but she is pretty notorious for being late. So after hanging out for a few hours, I was ready to go back to my apartment, as I was pretty tired already and wanted to Skype with my boyfriend before bed. I said my goodbyes to my friends and left probably around 10:30 or 11 o'clock. I walked out into the parking lot and towards guest parking. Guest parking is situated up a tiny little incline at the other end of the building. As I mounted the small hill, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye, and I stopped very briefly, turning to look to my left. I saw a man hurriedly stand up and move away from a first-floor window with its lights on. I remember he was distinctly middle-aged, heavier set and balding, wearing a red t-shirt and jeans. My presence seemed to spook him, as he began to move around the back of the building out of my sight. He was also not very far from me, and I was spooked as well, so I quickly moved up the hill and got into my car. It was highly unusual to see a man of his age in the apartment complex, and my internal alarms were going off. When my doors were locked, I texted my friend Pat to tell her to make sure all of their windows were locked and that they secured their back door, which didn't have a working lock. The apartment complex was slow to address tenant complaints. I told her I saw a man creeping around the first-floor windows, and I knew our friend Brianna often left her window unlocked so she could open it when she smoked. After alerting her, I drove back to my apartment, which took about 5 minutes. I was a little shaken and I basically sprinted from my car to my apartment's back door. When I got inside, I Skype called my boyfriend and checked my texts. Pat and the other roommate that was home had locked all the windows and turned off the lights in the main living area. Pat told me I should report the incident to the police, and I was a little torn about doing so. My boyfriend agreed that I should report it, and I called the police department directly instead of 911. The officer that answered took my description and my personal info and thanked me for the call. He told me they would be sending some squad cars out to investigate. I didn't have any further contact with the police after that. But my friend Brianna said she arrived back at her apartment as the police were pulling up, lights flashing. Apparently they couldn't find the guy, but the apartment complex did issue a warning and a description of the creeper. I'm glad I did call the police, even if they didn't find the man. My next encounter with a peeping Tom happened closer towards the end of that same semester. This is the one that scared me the most. For the first time in my life, I had my fight or flight instincts kick into overdrive. I was coming back from my same friend's apartment one night. It was late, and it was fairly dark and windy. My apartment complex had only a few lights in the parking lot, and only a light at each front door on the buildings. More often than not, I would enter my apartment from the back door, which was a huge glass sliding pane. The backs of the apartment buildings were not lit, and each ground floor patio and bedroom window had hedges next to them, which made hiding pretty easy. On this particular night, I should have entered through the front door, but the back door was closer and I wanted to get inside and out of the wind. I walked across the parking lot and to the back of my building, head down against the wind. I looked up as I got closer to my apartment, and my heart leapt into my throat. There was someone standing behind my neighbor's bushes, directly in front of their bedroom window. The silhouette was distinctly male with short hair and broad shoulders. My fear was instantaneous. Whoever it was had seen me, and they ducked pretty quickly behind the bush, knowing they had nowhere to really run with me right in their path. I remember cursing myself because I had left my knife in my purse, and I had nothing in my backpack to defend myself with. I only had my keys in my hands. As I struggled with the lock in the darkness, and got inside quickly as I could, I locked the door and drew the curtains shut, backing away into the darkness. I was fucking terrified at this point. I thought I was alone in the apartment, and I thought this guy definitely knows where I live now. The only thing separating me from him was a glass pane. I rushed into my living room, livid that the apartment complex didn't put locks on our doors. I called my boyfriend almost in tears, telling him what happened as I looked for my knife. He stayed on the phone with me for a little bit as I calmed down. He was angry that there was nothing he could do for me being so far away. This time I was strongly considering calling 911, because this incident had happened only 20 or so feet from my own apartment. My body was pumping with adrenaline, which only made me feel more jumpy and scared. However, my boyfriend told me that the guy was probably gone at this point anyway, and that seeing me had scared him off. The fact that he had ducked to avoid me made it seem that he likely had no intentions of hurting me, and I had interrupted his creeping. I was still scared, but I thanked him and hung up. What if the guy was still in the complex, looking for more windows he could see into? I texted my roommates asking if they were home. Both of them were, and had been trying to fall asleep when I ran into the apartment like a madwoman. They both emerged from their rooms and I told them about what I saw. And my one roommate told me she was just as scared as I was. Apparently, girls had been reporting on Yik Yak that a man dressed all in black, face covered, had been harassing girls on and off campus, going so far as to chase some of them and threaten them. I was hoping the individual that I encountered was not that person. I didn't sleep a wink that night. My bed was directly underneath a large window that sat at ground level. I was always uneasy about it, but that night it was much worse. I felt safer knowing I wasn't alone, but for the rest of the semester, I was extra cautious at night. When I came home from work or from my friend's place, I always had a knife in a reachable pocket. In hindsight, I really regret not reporting the incident to the police or the apartment complex. I didn't even say anything to our neighbors. They usually had all their blinds and curtains open at night, and you could always see inside. For the two girls that lived there, that didn't seem so smart to me. But I didn't say anything to them because I didn't know them, and I figured they wouldn't believe me. However, about a week later, I started noticing that at night all of their blinds and curtains were drawn, and I began to wonder if maybe they had seen someone at their window one night. I no longer live in that town, but to anyone out there that gets a kick out of peeping into people's homes, let's not meet. Male, 185 pounds, 25, 23 when this happened. My girlfriend Lauren and I were at my house, ranch-style, main level plus basement, near the mountains, woods and backyard, closest neighbor 7 miles away. At that point, we'd been dating for 3 months. We were watching a movie. I put the moves on her and things started getting heavy. A loud crash came from the basement. Think bowling ball knocking down pins loud. And I ran down, baseball bat, flashlight in hand, searched every crevice. Nothing, no evidence. Chalked it up to something falling. Walked back up to Lauren. She's under about 4 blankets and trying to be as small as possible. I comfort her, reassure her. Lauren falls asleep before the movie ends. I switch to Netflix and eventually fall asleep. I woke up to, light sleeper, shuffling of feet and my front door closing quietly. In my sleepy state, I thought it was Lauren leaving. I looked down, no, she's still in my arms, sound asleep. Okay, fully awake now. I am up on my feet. Grab the bat. Flashlight. Whoever that was is now outside. I lock the door, and before walking out like a deer in a hunting arena, I look out each window. Darkness. Nothing. Then lastly, I look out the window that is above my sink in the kitchen and see what looks to be a 6-foot-tall, burly male with a mask on, standing behind a tree with his head poking out, tilted, looking at the house. Very The Strangers-esque. I'm fucking panicking like a pussy on the inside, but on the outside I must remain combative. I walk fast to Lauren, wake her up, whisper, "Don't panic, but there is a guy with a mask on in the backyard. Stay low." She's like, "Seriously? What the fuck, Luke?" She's panic whispering, but stays low on the couch. I stealthily look out of the front bay window. The masked perp is by my fucking garage under the motion light. Standing there, motionless. Now that he's in the light, I notice that he has a meat cleaver in his hand. His head is tilted, just looking at my house. His arm limp, cleaver by his side. I get down low and army crawl to Lauren, kiss her forehead. I tell her to stay put, that I will keep her safe. I keep crawling to the window by my back door, close to my garage, look out near the motion light. It's off, and the masked perp is gone. I slowly stand up, scale the walls to my bedroom. I look out the south side window that is adjacent to my bed. Keep in mind it is pitch black in my room. I see masked perp slowly walking down my driveway back to the house, his arms swinging back and forth, caveman or Bigfoot style. He then stops dead in his tracks, just turns his head, tilts it, and looks straight into my bedroom window, at me. He just stands there. I am just standing there, like I am frozen. How he knew which window I was at? No fucking clue. The fight must have kicked in full blast, cause I wasn't playing around anymore. I grabbed my Beretta A300 Semi out of my safe, and my Surefire X300 flashlight. I also grabbed my 6 Sauer P226. I beelined it to Lauren, handed her the cig, told her I'm heading outside. Quickly laced up my combats, unlocked the door. Quietly opened it, quietly shut it, and quietly locked it behind me. Restyle, I laid down individual surveillance of my land for this masked perp fucker. He wasn't anywhere in sight. I checked everywhere, believe me. Walked back into my house, Lauren still on the couch, cig in hand. She asked me if anything happened. I said no, and that he appeared to be gone. I checked every nook and cranny in my house for safety. While knuckling my Beretta, nothing. Nothing was found. Nothing was missing. I never saw the masked perp again. Now, I want y'all's theories on what the hell that was about. Keep in mind, I'm very meticulous when it comes to keeping all doors, windows locked when not in use, even when I am home. Also, my closest neighbor, a sweet old lady and old man, who I am friendly with, is 7 miles away. So how did he get into my house? Lauren and I both fell asleep at one point. Why didn't he take action? Why did he leave? Why was he creeping outside? Was he roaming my house? Did he watch us while we were sleeping? Where was he hiding when I first checked the basement? And what was that crashing noise? Lastly, why did he choose me? I still don't understand what the fuck happened and what his intentions were. He could have killed us so easily. I'm sorry this isn't as creepy as most posts on this sub, but it scared me to the core. And I'm curious to hear all of your guys' opinions and thoughts on his intentions. This is really fresh in my mind, as this happened to me just yesterday with my friends. I'm going to change some names around to keep their identities safe, because they are underage and some people may know us on here. I'm a 20-year-old college girl in the state of Virginia. I am a young, aspiring animator. I hang out with my boyfriend's little brother and his high school friends. I know, kinda weird, but they are mostly more fun to be around than a few of my friends. Sam, boyfriend's brother, Dean, one of his friends, just to be safe. Yesterday I got out of my classes early due to my art class cancelled on me, so I went home. I got home and was there to help my dad with his special brownies. They'll come into play later. And it was fun mixing the batter together and putting it in the oven. Truly a great father and daughter bonding, right? Yeah, that's me and my dad. After we was done, he gave a baggie with 2 of them to give to my friends to try, 2 'cause I had already eaten 1. The smell was my weakness, and told me to be careful with them. At this point, I got excited as we had been waiting to try this, and gave Sam a call telling him about the brownies and if they wanted to head to the spot. Around 7 o'clock on the dot, I get to Dean's house and pick them up. With that, we headed up to the old church about a mile from his place. No one ever goes there, or anything because of how old it is. There is one person, but she is there because I think she owns it and just comes to check on things. As well, there is a motion light there. That always scared me. It always turns on every 5 minutes. It's broken. I pull into the lot and go to the far back near the old graveyard in front of us and big bushes on the left of us. So yeah, already creepy. But I didn't mind it anymore due to us going there every time we had weed and smoked, so I didn't think anything would happen. So we started smoking and eating. Yes, I had another brownie, sue me. And started telling stupid jokes to one another as we relaxed there. For a while, it was fine, until I started feeling like we was being watched. You know that feeling you get, like a shiver going up your back, making your heart race? Yeah, that was what I was feeling at that moment, but I tried to push it away from my mind, just thinking it was the weed messing with me, and nothing more. Then 2 hours later, I had just rolled us another blunt with a strawberry wrap. As I was sealing it, we all hear a loud break of a branch, making us all jump. Dean looked outside, shocked, slightly, trying to see through the dark. He may only be 15, but he did look scary due to his height. I looked around with him, through our windows, for he wasn't going to leave the car in case it was a bear. I then needed to release the tension in the car and finally said, "Oh guys, let's relax. It must have just been a deer walking around." And at that, everyone calmed down, but it was still there. So I lit up the blunt and started the chain, wanting us to relax again, for I really didn't want us to be freaked out anymore. So for a few minutes, that is what happened. We all relaxed and Dean started telling his stories again about some crazy stuff. Until he stopped again, as he looked out the window again. I asked him if he was okay, but he didn't answer me. When he did, all he said was, "Start the car," in a soft whisper. And at this moment, a shiver ran down my body as I unwillingly asked him, why? He looked at me with a look of worry and fear. "I saw someone standing in the bush. We have to get out of here. Now." He said this more harshly as if he wasn't joking. I quickly put my hand in my pocket to get my key, but to my shock, my key wasn't in my pocket. I feel my body go numb as I knew I just had it there, panic quickly running through me as I tried to keep myself calm, just in case the creepy person was watching us still. I placed my hands on the steering wheel as I looked ahead of me, and I said this as quietly as possible. "Dean, in my little box next to you, there is a package. Open it and give me the pepper spray." And he was dumb enough to ask why. This just made me feel even more terrified when I heard something moving from the bushes, making the light cut on. But sadly, we didn't see them still. But with the little light, I was able to find my key laying inside my armrest, and I quickly cut on the car. As my bright lights cut on, there was 2 men standing 10 feet from my car. They are both white guys, one really skinny like a hiker with a mess of brown hair. The other guy was chunky, with a huge belly. He looked like a skinhead, sorry, but he did. But the look on their faces, I could tell that they were shocked that I turned on my lights. I screamed loudly, and I never scream. I quickly threw the car in reverse and packed away from them as, at this point, they started running for my car. Why didn't I just run over them, you may ask? Well, my whole car smelled of weed, and in Virginia it isn't legal here, and I had 2 minors in the car with me. I'd rather not get in trouble from the law. I flicked the car into drive and sped off down the road, leaving them in the dust from the dirt drive. We were scared to death from this, and the weed didn't help with the fear. So we headed back to Dean's and smoked weed from his hookah. And after a while, got the dumb idea of going back. I know. Truly a dumb idea. We got to the church and rode around it, pointing our headlights in the bushes. We stopped and watched the tree line to see if we could find them, but nothing happened. But then, when we turned off the car again, we noticed lights coming from the bush. It was a camera flash. At this, in my state, I got pissed getting out of my car stupidly and yelled at the bushes, "Hey bitch, why are you taking pictures, fucking cunt?" Yeah, I am a stupid girl. At this, Sam and Dean got out of the car to get me back in, telling me to just leave. I got back in the car and started it again. As I slowly turned my car around to drive away, I didn't tell them this, but I saw the 2 men walking out of the bushes with something shining in their hands. I know it was a knife, and I felt my heart stop. What if I was alone there, smoking by myself? What if I never found my key? I would be dead. Thank God for that creepy, shitty motion light. For those 2 creepy guys that hide at the church, please let's never meet. I live in a very rural, mountainous area of California, and at this time was working as a cook in a restaurant, bar. I was 24 and not in the best place financially at the time, so I had been borrowing my uncle's car to drive to and from work. I worked from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m. I know everyone in this area well, and don't have a single enemy. I get along with everyone. One night I had gotten done closing up the kitchen, and decided to have a beer before going home. The bartender was talking to a fellow community member, and trying to get him to go home. He was too drunk for his own good. There were some out-of-towners that weren't too fond of the locals' demeanor, and it seemed like it was getting intense between them. I just saw it as a local that I knew as being annoyingly drunk, but perfectly harmless. I had my beer and went out and got in the car. I could see inside the bar and spotted the drunk local, completely smashed. I felt bad for not offering a ride home, but was tired from work and told myself he'll be okay. I drive away. Mind you, there's no street lamps, no buildings, it's middle of nowhere, pitch black, quiet. I realize about a mile from the bar that I should turn around and offer the local a ride home. He didn't live far, and it wouldn't be far out of my way to do so. I turn around at a muddy turn and go back. I get in the bar, and I basically was short with the local and told him that I would pick him up in the morning and he could get his truck sober. That I'll give him a ride home tonight. I was 24 at the time, and a small-built female. He was a smaller-built, 35-ish looking male. I knew this guy had hit on me in the past, but I assumed he was just a 35-year-old weirdo who was lonely. I always shrugged off his advances. Anyway, with a couple of minutes of reasoning, he finally hopped in the car and I took off, driving towards his home, about 5 miles away on winding mountain roads. I didn't notice anything really at first. He seemed drunk, quiet, mumbly. But not too long into the drive, he starts saying thank you, how nice I am to help him out. I say the usual, of course, no problem. Couldn't let him be there knowing full well he wasn't able to drive. This is where I start getting creeped out. I make a turn on the road he lives on. It's a long road, not many houses. All of the driveways are long, about a mile or two. So you don't see any houses. It gets really quiet, and it's dark in the car. I can't see him really well. I notice him look at me though. I could see the reflection of his eyes from the dim lights on the radio. This is something I remember vividly. His eyes gleaming, kind of green from the lights on the radio knobs. He was just looking at me. I, without returning his gaze, said, "What's up? Why are you looking at me like that?" He says to me, "You're so pretty. I never get this chance to be alone with you." I shrugged it off, trying to play it cool, although I started regretting my decision. All of a sudden, he reaches over to me while I'm driving and tries to put his hand, I'm assuming, on my breast. But instead, his hands land on my shoulder neck area. I start yelling at him, telling him to stop. I slam on my brakes. In the middle of the road, no one is behind me, there's no one for miles, and I scream at him to get out of this car now. And I repeat it over and over. At this point, I had my hands off the wheel and I was trying to push him out of the car. I had leaned over and opened the car door. I had never in my life realized my own strength, my own weak strength. This 30-something male was not budging against me. I notice him laughing a really sloppy laugh. He says, "You and I both know that no one's around." I said to him, "We just left the bar. At least 5 people know where I am going. Please stop. Here's a flashlight. Walk on home. I'm done with you tonight." He is quiet for a minute before saying, "I don't feel like walking much." The way he said it scared the living shit out of me. I start screaming, not a hoarse scream, but like an ear-piercing scream. I knew the scream was strong and loud, and I had hurt even my own ears. Just hoping someone had their windows open somewhere off in the woods. But nothing happened. We struggled for what felt like minutes as he kept trying to come at me. This entire time, he's kind of laughing. He was drunk, so that was probably my only advantage. I was not. He was sloppy and trying to attack me for whatever reason. I pushed on him like I had never pushed on anything in my life. I pushed so hard that I felt my arms just burning with pain. When he finally gets out of the car, I slam on the gas, not even bothering with the door. Remember, I was headed down a long-ass road in the middle of nowhere, and not on my road. It's a dead-end road after about 20 miles, so I keep driving down this road I know well, knowing full well I will need to stop to turn around. But this road is like 1.5 lanes wide, and there's hardly any turnouts. When I finally do, I turn around fast and in someone's dirt driveway, afraid of the car being still for even a second. I take off driving, knowing he'll be up ahead any second. I never see him. I never see him again. He was a local I'd known for years and saw frequently. I don't know if he took off to another area from embarrassment or what, but I never saw him again. I arrived home, shaking, red, scratched, out of breath. My boyfriend and our friend were at home playing Jenga, and I told them immediately. And they knew who it was too, and they went to try and find him. Never saw him again. That was last November. And let's hope I never meet up with him again. A little bit of description and backstory to help paint the picture. At the time of this, I was roughly 26 years old. I'm 30 now. My husband and I, at the time, lived in a military city. He was enlisted. And this particular city was only popular, not just for the base it housed, but by its incredible crime rate. Honestly, if people had warned us ahead of time, we would have happily moved out of the city and dealt with the long drive. But I digress. At the time, we lived in a duplex in a really bad neighborhood. The way the unit was set up was if you stood in the street of our parking lot style driveway and looked at the house, our unit was to the left, our neighbors to the right and exposed to the street, since our building was on the corner. The entire property was surrounded by a chain-link fence, save a 6-foot privacy fence that ran along the back of the property to block our view of the parking lot that led to the apartments behind us. I promise this will be relevant. As I said, we lived in a horrible neighborhood where crackheads and hookers ran free, but I didn't feel overly unsafe. At the time, I had a 200-pound English Mastiff, a sweetheart, but intimidating from a distance. And my size always gave me a hint of security. I'm 5'9" and definitely not a beanpole. We also have a few sweet neighbors which helped buffer the horrible. One such neighbor was a man that walked the neighborhood regularly. He walked everywhere, and our house was about center in his path to the store, and the like, so we'd see him at least once a day or so. Dwayne was a nice enough man, my height, roughly my build, and always smiling. But not that creeper kind of smile, a normal, jovial smile. He never set off alarm bells, which makes this more disturbing. We'd been living at our house for about a year or so, and all the while gotten to know some of our neighbors better. Up until this point, Dwayne would always wave hello and offer some small talk. He'd speak to my husband more than myself because I just don't do well in southern heat, and he tended to be long-winded, So I'd wave, say hello, and then go inside after a few short minutes. Everything was fine, until my husband was deployed. We'd been married at that point for 6 years, and this was his 5th deployment during that time. So I was used to being left alone. It didn't bother me in the least, especially since it would be a 9-week deployment. Seriously, we were so pissed about that. What a pointless time frame. And I had already learned the layout of the new city fairly well. One day I was coming home from the grocery store, about 2 weeks after my husband had left. I am a firm believer in one trip with the bags, so I loaded up my arms completely and headed for the house. As I said before, our yard was completely encased in a fence. So, just after I managed to shut the gate, I hear someone calling up at me. Turning, I saw Dwayne bearing his normal, happy, wide smile and heading for me. I shift the bags and give him my attention. I was raised to be polite to people, and since I knew him vaguely, I had no problem saying hello. Besides, seeing my arms full of groceries, some of which was milk, eggs, and other cold things, he surely wouldn't keep me too long. I was wrong. He starts droning on about nothing in particular, during which I could only smile and nod. I waited patiently for a break in the conversation, so I could head inside. But he barely took a second to breathe, let alone let me speak. For a little while, the conversation had been pretty mundane, until he started talking about his lady friend. Without warning, he started to tell me explicit details about his relationship with whoever this woman was. He went on to tell me how much she likes what he can do to her, his techniques, and, to my horror, how good he is at going down on her. I knew I must have looked as horrified as I felt, because he started chuckling and went on as though nothing was wrong. He even went so far as to ask if my husband was as good. At this point, not only were the grocery bags digging into my hands and arm, but I was thoroughly creeped the fuck out. I told him I had to go put my groceries away and let out the dogs. I thought that was the end of the conversation, but evidently not. Nor was it any less unsettling. "Oh yeah, your man's gone now, huh?" It took my brain a second to realize what he'd said. I never told him my husband was gone. I didn't tell anyone who wasn't a close friend, so naturally, my guard rose. "Yeah," he went on. "You need someone here to take care of you." "I'm fine," was all I could really think to say. For some reason, I didn't even bother saying he was wrong. I guess on some level, I thought my husband must have told him. "Well, how about I come by later and make you dinner tonight? I'm a hell of a cook." I knew my brows came together and my eyes were wide because I could feel it. "How about 6? I can come back around 6, make you some dinner, then we can watch some TV. You shouldn't be alone." He just kept persisting, which made every hair on my body stand on end. I told him no thanks. Didn't even tell him to fuck off, which I have no idea why not. And turned around. Without bothering to look back, I went inside. I locked my doors and waited until I was sure he was gone before letting out my dogs. By the time 6 came, I didn't even want to be in the house in case he did stop by. After making sure everything was locked up tight, I left and drove around for an hour or so before coming home. I didn't even bother turning on more than the TV when I got back, just in case he came by again. I didn't see him for a couple of days, maybe a week and a half. I was a smoker back then, and hated smoking in the house, so I'd let the dogs out, smoke a cigarette, then bring them back inside. After Dwayne's disturbing confrontation, I took to smoking in the backyard on my back steps. From where I sat, I could only see a few feet of the main street, being as our unit was away from the street, beside neighbors who had trees and bushes, and the privacy fence between us and the apartments. I felt relatively shielded. I knew that if I saw Dwayne, I'd be more than capable of ducking around the corner of the house and hiding. Like I said, there was just a small strip of the road that left me exposed. It was really easy to stay hidden, or so I thought. One day I'm standing outside in the front yard, talking to the sweet little old lady that lives across the street. We were just having a nice little talk, until Dwayne suddenly came walking up. I of course felt uneasy, but a little safer with my neighbor there, since I didn't think he'd be as gross as he was before. He wasn't, but he was no less creepy. My neighbor had asked me if I quit smoking because she didn't see me out front anymore. That was usually when she used to come and say hi, since she was always out gardening. I didn't immediately answer because Dwayne was there, but it didn't matter. He spoke up first and told my neighbor, "Nah, she smokes in the backyard now." My blood ran cold. Not once, not one single fucking time had I seen him walk by while I was back there. I never saw him walk by while I was back there, nor did I catch a glimpse of him when I stepped out of my front door and walked around the back. Never. I politely excused myself and went inside, creeped out as hell. The only way I could think he might have known I was in the back was if he somehow had been watching me through the bushes and trees in my neighbor's yard, to the other side, or through the privacy fence that led to the apartments. Each thought was as disturbing as the last. I couldn't stand the thought of him peering at me from the shadows. That was the last time I smoked outside. I didn't go outside unless I had errands to run until my husband came home a few weeks later. I had told him everything, and he admitted. That was creepy as hell, and he just told me to keep our mastiff close. He was very protective of me, and I did. The last time I saw Dwayne was just a glimpse. I had let my dogs outside, and a few minutes after sitting back on the couch, I heard my mastiff losing his mind. Anyone who owns dogs knows the difference between a normal bark and an angry, "I'm gonna rip your leg off" bark. This was the latter, and it terrified me. Until this point, he'd only ever growled protectively twice and never barked. Freaked out, I opened up the front door and saw Dwayne standing halfway up my driveway. It looked like he'd been walking up to my fence, probably to say hi, when my dog caught sight of him. The bark was so ferocious that it had him and me completely still. My dog continued to bark and even charge the fence, which he easily could have taken down if he chose. Every hair on the back of his neck and down his spine was standing on end, and it was pretty obvious he wanted a piece of Dwayne. Dwayne glanced at me, forced a smile and a wave, and backed slowly out of the driveway. My dog didn't calm down until he was out of sight, at which time I was able to get him in the house. I was so grateful that I gave him half a package of sliced turkey lunch meat. I don't know what, if Dwayne had anything planned, but my dog, who never had a problem with him up until that point, definitely knew something wasn't right. Like I said, we'd been in that house for just over a year, and many times Dwayne had stopped at the fence to talk, and our dog never reacted like that. It still freaks me out to think about why my dog suddenly changed his mind. I haven't seen him since, so Dwayne, we may have known each other, but for your sake, let's not meet again, or my dog may have something to say about it. So a few years ago, I used to work at the Waffle House in a college town, so weird people really aren't that unusual. To start off, there are only two 24/7 restaurants there, and I worked third shift at the Waffle House. Sometimes when a person's car would break down, the police would drop them off at one of these two places. They weren't supposed to, so they'd drop them off within walking distance, but not actually outside, like some shitty loophole. So one night, I was working with a cook and another waitress. We'll call them Mark and Cassie. Around 11 p.m., this old guy wanders into the lobby with a little bag. First off, we don't usually get older people after around 8 or so at the latest. Second off, dude's creepy as fuck. He starts off telling us about how his car broke down on the highway and the police dropped him off in the parking lot next door. I feel bad for him, because it's the middle of the night, he's not from around here and he has no money. So I pour him coffee and I don't charge him. My co-workers are usually on drugs, so I assume free coffee isn't going to get me fired. This is when the guy just starts talking my ear off. Like, I can barely get a word in edgewise, which is difficult, since I'm usually the talker. He talks about what happened to him, and then starts trying to sell the tools he has in his little bag. Of course we say no, but he just keeps asking about it. He also starts wandering in and out of the store. The first time he does so, Mark, who's ex-military, searches his bag to make sure he doesn't have any weapons because he's starting to raise some eyebrows. There's nothing but tools though, so we feel marginally safer. When he comes back in, I keep talking to him. Mark and Cassie nope the fuck away to the other side of the store and watch. Keep in mind, this guy is literally the only person here. We don't start getting people until 1:30 when everyone leaves the bars. Now he's starting to talk about a lot of weird things. I tell him I'm interested in studying prisons, and he tells me the best way to do that is to get arrested. He then starts talking about how he used to be in prison but never says why. He's starting to make us really nervous, so I start to draw him. In case the dude decides to murder us, we'll have something, because I'm good at drawing things I can see. There's a low little wall where we can usually write out customer receipts, so I can draw him without him noticing. Not that it matters, since he's looking straight ahead while he talks to me. We start getting customers because it's about 1 a.m. Bars let out at 1, so anyone who can drive gets there at 1, while those who walk get there 30 minutes later. And this guy keeps talking no matter where I am. He doesn't raise his voice or anything. He just keeps talking at the same level even when I walk away to take care of other customers. At this point, I'm starting to think this guy is schizophrenic. I'm a psych major, so I mean actual schizophrenia, not just crazy, and wanting to get away. But I really can't because I'm afraid he might do something. He does, but not what I was afraid of. He starts just insulting customers. He tells one kid that he's fat, and why is he so fat? He needs to lose weight. Then he talks to a family of travelers and says, "Your wife and kids are fine, but why are you so ugly?" We decide he has to go. Mark tells him he has to leave as we've warned him several times to leave the other customers alone. So Mark tells him to leave or we'll call the cops. The guy starts yelling at us and glares at me a lot and asks why he should leave, but he finally does so. But he comes back half an hour later and we have to kick him out again for harassing customers again. He doesn't come back that night, so we decide he must have found a way home or contacted someone. So I finish around 7 a.m. and walk home. I live above the bars downtown, so it's a 30-minute walk. But along the way, I see the old guy. I dart behind a building and take the long way home. I don't think much of it because, hey, it's a small town, and there's not a lot of places to go. I have to work again the next day, so I go home, sleep, and get all my chores done. I'm pretending to be an adult as usual. So then, about an hour before work, Waffle House calls me and my co-worker Kevin tells me the old guy has been coming around several times during the day, every couple of hours looking for me. I'm a 23-year-old female, so they're worried about what he wants. I call my friend Jason and tell him why I need a ride, and he brings me in. I ask what's been going on, and apparently this guy has been in at least 10 times asking to talk to me. He never says why. He just says he wants to talk to me. So I'm on edge, waiting because I have no idea what this guy wants. Is this 60-year-old guy pissed off I didn't defend him when he was kicked out? Is he asking for me just because I told him my name? Or is there something else? Surprisingly, for the first few hours of my shift, we don't see him, but he eventually comes in and ignores me. I'm super confused, but I keep an eye on him again. I've also brought pepper spray. Before long, though, we kick him out again for harassing customers. It's very confusing for me. He asks for me all day and then ignores me when he does come in. But after we kick him out, he doesn't come back. When my shift ends, my friend asks if I need a ride and I tell him no. The guy has left and hasn't come back, so I'm good. Well, that's what I thought until I saw him walking towards me after work. He yells out for me and starts coming at me, but I run into another building I know has another entrance/exit. I sneak out another way before this guy can find me, and thanking every god I can think of, I know the town way better than him. I still have no idea what he wants, but I'm not taking any chances. I sneak home in some back ways and get home. I call work and let them know what happened, and ask for the next few days off. They agree, and later they tell me the old guy kept coming in the next few days, and they finally called the police and they took him away. I still have no idea what his plans were, but creepy old guy? Let's not meet again.